Celine Peters had 3 unbreakable rules for surviving the world of Manhattan's elite families. Never blur professional lines. Never ignore red flags in men who smile too easily. And never, under any circumstances, attend a family gala before the 6-month mark. Standing in the Choi Estate's marble ballroom wearing a red velvet dress that Young Jae insisted on buying her, watching crystal chandeliers cast shadows that looked like cages, she realized she'd shattered all 3. And the pieces were about to cut. "Stop fidgeting," Young Jae murmured against her ear, his hand sliding lower on her waist, in a way that felt more like claiming than comfort. "You look perfect." Perfect felt like a lie. The dress was too tight, too red, 2 times expensive asterisk, the kind of garment that came with expectations Celine couldn't afford. She looked up at the Choi Estate, a 3-story fortress of white stone and black iron that looked less like a home and more like a compound. Every window glowed with warm light, but there was nothing warm about the shadows moving behind the glass. "You said this was just dinner with your family." "It is." Young Jae flashed that easy smile, the one that had disarmed her completely when he'd walked into her Williamsburg studio asking for private Korean lessons. "Sunday dinner. Very casual. There are valets, Young Jae, and security checkpoints. And, is that a string quartet? The Founders' Jubilee is a Times tradition asterisk." He squeezed her waist, guiding her up the stone steps. "My grandfather started it 40 years ago, when he built his first legitimate business. It's just family celebrating family." Celine had grown up an only child in a modest Bronx apartment, where family dinner meant her mom, her, and whatever takeout they could afford. This felt like walking into a museum after hours. Beautiful, expensive, and utterly forbidden. How many people count as just family? Maybe 30. 40 if the cousins from Seoul flew in. He grinned, pulling her closer. "Relax. Beautiful. Smile. Eat whatever my grandmother puts in front of you. And don't mention anything about tutoring Ji-hoon's behavioral issues unless someone asks directly. That feels like a trap. It's called Times Discretion asterisk." His voice carried an edge she'd only heard once before, when a parent at her studio had questioned her credentials. "This family values loyalty above everything. Show them you can be discreet, and they'll love you." The door opened before they reached it. A woman in her 70s stood in the entryway, small and elegant in a traditional Times hanbok Times of deep blue silk. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes, dark, sharp, unnervingly focused, landed on Celine with the precision of a scalpel. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Young Jae," she said in Korean, her voice like silk over steel. "You're late. Halmioni, this is Celine." "Celine, my grandmother, Madame Choi Haejin, Mrs. Choi." Celine extended her hand, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. "Thank you so much for having me. Your home is beautiful." Haejin looked at the offered hand for 3 seconds too long. Then she took it. Her grip was cool, dry, and far stronger than it should have been. "Celine Peters," she said, testing each syllable like a wine she hadn't decided to swallow. "The etiquette tutor. Young Jae says you're teaching our Ji-hoon." "Yes, ma'am. He's incredibly bright. And you're from the Bronx." It wasn't a question. "Public schools. Scholarship to Hunter College. Studio apartment in Williamsburg you opened with a small business loan 3 years ago." Celine's blood went cold. Yes." Haejin released her hand and turned to Young Jae, speaking rapid Korean that Celine couldn't follow. Whatever she said made Young Jae's jaw tighten, his smile becoming something sharp and defensive. Then Haejin looked back at Celine, and something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, but assessment. "Come inside before the soup gets cold," she said in English. "If my grandson cares enough to bring you here, I suppose I should care enough to feed you." She disappeared into the house, leaving Celine feeling like she'd just survived the first round of an elimination she hadn't known she'd entered. "That went well," Young Jae said. "How could you possibly tell? She didn't ask about your family medical history or your credit score. Trust me, that's a victory." He guided her forward, his hand now feeling more like a leash than affection. "Just follow my lead. Everything's going to be fine." The interior of the estate was exactly what Celine had feared. Museum quality. Marble floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers. The walls were covered in what looked like original artwork. Bold, modern pieces that probably cost more than her yearly rent. A massive dining table dominated the formal room, set with enough place settings to feed a small army, each plate rimmed in gold. Voices echoed from deeper in the house, Korean and English mixing together in a symphony of conversation that felt more like controlled chaos than celebration. Young Jae led her through introductions that blurred together. Uncle Jae-sung, Aunt Mi-ra, cousins whose names she immediately forgot, a sister-in-law named Soo-jin, who looked at Celine with something between pity and warning. "This is Young Jae's latest project," someone murmured in Korean, just loud enough for Celine to catch. "American," another voice answered. "He always picks Americans, easier to control." Celine's stomach turned to lead. "Come meet my father," Young Jae said, seemingly oblivious, or deliberately ignoring, the whispers following them like smoke. Choi Sang-woo stood at the head of the living room, holding a glass of whiskey and speaking in low tones with two men in expensive suits. He was shorter than Celine had imagined, stocky and solid, with silver threading through his black hair. When he saw them approaching, he stopped mid-sentence. His eyes, the same dark, unreadable eyes as his mother, locked onto Celine. "So," he said in perfect, unaccented English, "this is her. Father, this is Celine Peters. Celine, my father, Choi Sang-woo." Sang-woo studied her the way an art dealer studies a forgery. His gaze lingered on her dress, her shoes, the simple pearl earrings that had been her mother's. Then he smiled, warm, genuine, and somehow more terrifying than his mother's ice. "Welcome to our home, Miss Peters. Young Jae tells me you've worked wonders with our Ji-hoon. He's a wonderful student, Mr. Choi. Very intuitive. Please call me Sang-woo. We're not formal here." He gestured to the room, to the 30-plus people in designer clothing drinking wine that probably cost more than her car. "You drink whiskey?" Yes, thank you." "Good. Young Jae, get her a glass. The hibiki, not the cheap scotch." As Young Jae moved toward the bar, Sang-woo leaned closer, his voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. "My mother's worried you're after the family money," he said pleasantly. "My wife thinks you're too American. I think—" He paused, his smile never wavering. "I think you're exactly what my son deserves." It should have been a compliment. It felt like a curse. Before Celine could respond, the room shifted. Not physically, but the air pressure changed, the temperature dropped, and every conversation in the room stopped mid-word. Someone had entered the house. Soo-jin appeared at Celine's elbow, her voice barely a whisper. "He came. I didn't think he'd come." "Who?" Footsteps approached from the foyer. Heavy, measured, deliberate. A man's voice called out in Korean. Low, rough, carrying the kind of authority that didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. Haejin's response from the dining room was sharp, almost pleased. Asterisk Taehyun. Asterisk. The name hit the room like a dropped stone in still water. Ripples of recognition, tension, asterisk, fear, asterisk. "That's Young Jae's older brother," Soo-jin murmured. "The head of the family business. He usually skips these dinners. He never brings anyone. He never..." So, the man who walked into the living room made Celine forget how to breathe. He was taller than Young Jae, broader through the shoulders, built like something designed to endure rather than charm. He wore a black suit that fit like a weapon, tailored perfectly to his frame. His hair was shorter than his brother's, styled back severely, revealing a face that was all sharp angles and controlled violence. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, another disappeared into his collar. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Dark, intelligent, absolutely merciless, and currently locked directly on her with an intensity that felt like a physical grip around her throat. He stopped walking. She stopped breathing. The moment stretched, strange, charged, dangerous, until Young Jae appeared beside her with 2 whiskey glasses, and something in his posture changed. His easy confidence became something harder, more territorial. "Hyung," he said, and the casual term felt like a challenge. "Didn't know you were coming." Taehyun's gaze slid from Selene to his brother with visible effort, like tearing metal. "Father requested my presence." His voice was lower than Young Jae's, rougher, like gravel and smoke. "You must be the reason. This is Celine Peters. Celine, my brother Choi Taehyun." Taehyun's eyes cut back to her. She felt that look everywhere. In her throat, her chest, the base of her spine. "Miss Peters," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like both a greeting and a verdict. "Mr. Choi," she managed, her voice steadier than her pulse. "Nice to meet you." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Likewise, he moved past them toward the dining room, his shoulder brushing Young Jae's in a way that looked accidental, but felt like a warning. The room exhaled. Celine realized she'd been holding her breath. "You okay?" Young Jae asked quietly, his hand finding her waist again, possessive in a way it hadn't been before. "Fine. Your family is just intense." You have no idea. His grip tightened. But don't worry about Taehyun. He's all business, no charm. He'll probably ignore you all night. Celine glanced toward the dining room, where Taehyun had stopped to speak with his grandmother, his hand resting on the back of her chair with unexpected gentleness. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across 30 feet of marble and expensive furniture. He didn't look away. Neither did she. And in that moment, Celine understood with perfect, terrifying clarity. Youngjae was wrong. Choi Taehyun wasn't going to ignore her. The tension in the air was brittle, ready to snap. Youngjae seemed to feel it too. He glanced from his brothers retreating back to the string quartet playing softly in the corner. Come, Youngjae said, his voice tight. He pulled her toward the center of the room, not waiting for an answer. Let's dance. Now. Youngjae, people are staring. Let them stare. He pulled her into a waltz frame, his grip almost painful. I want them to see you with me. I want him to see. They moved stiffly to the music. Youngjae wasn't dancing with her. He was parading her. Over his shoulder, Celine saw Taehyun watching from the bar, a glass of dark liquor in his hand. He looked bored, dangerous, and utterly focused. Youngjae. The sharp call came from the dining room. It was Haejin. A word. Now, Youngjae swore under his breath. He stopped moving but didn't let go of Celine. I have to go. Stay here. Don't move. He marched toward his grandmother, leaving Celine stranded in the middle of the ballroom floor. She turned to retreat to the edge of the room, and nearly collided with a wall of black soot. Taehyun stood there. Up close, he smelled of cedar and something metallic, like rain on hot pavement. He didn't step back. He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You dance well, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. For a puppet. Excuse me? Taehyun's gaze dropped to her hand, to the ring finger that was currently bare, but wouldn't be for long. Then he leaned in, his mouth brushing the shell of her ear. The heat of him made her shiver. Wrong, brother, he whispered. Celine froze. What? He pulled back, his dark eyes mocking. You're dancing with the wrong brother, Miss Peters. Youngjae plays at power. I am power. Learn the difference before it kills you. Dinner is served, a staff member announced, cutting through the moment. Taehyun stepped back, the mask of indifference sliding back into place. After you. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. Dinner was an orchestrated performance of wealth and judgment. Celine sat between Youngjae and an aunt whose name she'd already forgotten, trying to navigate silverware she'd only seen in period dramas. The table stretched like an airport runway, polished mahogany, reflecting the chandelier's cold light. 32 people sat in assigned seats that felt more like battle positions than family gathering. Youngjae's hand found her knee under the table. Possessive, clammy, meant to reassure but only making her skin crawl. She'd spent 3 months convincing herself his touch was affection. Now, with Taehyun's warning still burning in her ears, every casual caress felt like a claim being staked on property Youngjae didn't own. You're not eating, Youngjae murmured, his breath hot against her ear. My grandmother notices everything. Celine picked up her fork, stabbing at something delicate and expensive that turned to ash in her mouth. Across the table, Taehyun sat beside his father, his posture military straight, his focus seemingly on his plate, but twice. No, 3 times. She'd felt his gaze like a brand against her skin. He'd called her collateral. The word had teeth. The meal ended near midnight. Youngjae disappeared with his father and uncles into a room with thick doors and thicker secrets. The women scattered to various sitting rooms, their laughter brittle and performative. Celine pleaded exhaustion, and Haejin's personal maid led her through a labyrinth of hallways to the guest wing. Her room was beautiful in the way museums were beautiful, untouchable, lifeless. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens that looked silver-edged under the moonlight. The bed was a 4-poster monstrosity with silk sheets that whispered against her skin like warnings. She didn't sleep. At dawn, she gave up pretending and dressed in the clothes she'd brought for the weekend. Simple black trousers, and a cream blouse that felt like armor compared to last night's red dress. The house was silent, but it was the silence of held breath, not rest. She found the library by accident, drawn by the smell of old paper and leather. It was a 2-story cathedral of books, with rolling ladders and stained glass windows that painted the floor in jewel tones. Her chest ached with unexpected relief. This was familiar territory. Books didn't judge. They didn't have hidden agendas. "You're up early." Selene spun, her heart launching into her throat. Ji-hoon stood in the doorway, small and solemn in pajamas printed with cartoon characters that felt wrong in this house of marble and menace. He was 10 years old, with his grandmother's sharp eyes and his Uncle Taehyun's careful stillness. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, crouching to his level. "How about you? Bad dreams?" He shook his head, stepping into the library with the caution of someone who'd learned to test the ground before committing weight. He held a tablet, his thin fingers gripping it like a lifeline. "We have our lesson today," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You promised we'd start the family history project." Right. The reason she was here in the first place, before Young Jae had made her forget her purpose. She was Ji-hoon's tutor, hired because he was troubled. Code for selectively mute. Code for the 5 previous tutors had quit within weeks. But Ji-hoon spoke to her. Not always, not loudly, but enough. "Let me grab my materials from my room," Selene said. "Meet me back here in 15 minutes? He nodded and disappeared like smoke. 20 minutes later, they sat at one of the library's massive oak tables, surrounded by leather-bound family albums and archived documents that Haejin's assistant had provided with suspicious ease. The Choi family tree was a gnarled thing, branches spreading across Korea and America, roots sunk deep into shipping, real estate, and businesses whose exact nature remained elegantly vague. "Your great-grandfather founded the first company in 1952, Selene said, pointing to a sepia photograph of a man with Taehyun's jaw and Young Jae's calculated smile. "After the war, when everything was chaos, he built something from nothing. He built it with blood," Ji-hoon said quietly. Selene's pen stilled. "What?" "That's what Uncle Taehyun says. Blood and sacrifice. That's the foundation." Ji-hoon traced the photograph with one small finger. "Everything beautiful has bones underneath." The words were too old for his mouth, too knowing. "Did your uncle tell you that?" "Uncle Taehyun tells me the truth." Ji-hoon looked up at her, his eyes ancient in his young face. "Uncle Young Jae tells me stories." Something cold slithered down Selene's spine. "What kind of stories?" Ji-hoon's gaze slid away, fixing on the stained glass window where morning light turned red to blood, blue to bruise. His hands started moving, not trembling, but deliberate. He reached for his tablet, fingers flying across the screen with the fluency of a generation raised digital. He turned it to face her. The screen showed a photograph of a woman, mid-30s, blonde, professional, attractive in a severe way, with wire-rimmed glasses and a smile that looked practiced. "Who is this?" Selene asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. "Miss Catherine." Ji-hoon's whisper was barely audible. "My tutor before you. Before Miss Park. Before Miss Wei. Before." The word hung like an execution. "She was nice," Ji-hoon continued, his voice flattening to something mechanical, protected. "She brought me books about dinosaurs. She helped me with my handwriting. She asked too many questions about the family files." Selene's throat closed. "Ji-hoon, Uncle Young Jae said she went back to England, that she got homesick." He looked at Selene directly then, and in his eyes was a knowledge no child should carry. "But I saw him that night. In the garden. He was digging. And Miss Catherine's phone was in his pocket. It kept buzzing. Someone named David kept calling. The library's temperature dropped 20 degrees. "Why are you telling me this?" Selene whispered. "Because you have the same access codes she did. Because Uncle Young Jae looks at you the way he looked at her, like you're useful." Ji-hoon's small hand covered hers, ice cold and shaking. "And because you're nice to me. I don't want you to go to England too." Selene's mind spun, fragments clicking together with sickening clarity. The family archives she'd been given access to, supposedly for educational purposes. The digital vault containing generations of documents, contracts, property deeds. Young Jae had set up her credentials himself, insisted on it, claimed he wanted to make her job easier. She'd thought it was thoughtfulness. It was framing. "Ji-hoon, I need you to listen very carefully," Selene said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing her throat. "Has anyone else ever asked you about footsteps in the hallway? Measured, heavy, not Young Jae's quick, eager stride." Ji-hoon went rigid, his hand crushing hers. The library door opened. Taehyun filled the doorway like a threat made flesh, dressed in black slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His forearms were marked with ink, geometric patterns and Korean script that looked less like decoration and more like documentation. Battle scars illustrated. His gaze went to Ji-hoon first, something softening infinitesimally in those hard eyes, then to their joined hands, then to Celine's face. He saw everything. She knew he did. Ji-hoon, Taehyun said in Korean, his voice gentle in a way that made Celine's chest ache. Your grandmother wants you. Something about breakfast and proper nutrition. Ji-hoon squeezed Celine's hand once, a warning or a plea, then slipped from his chair and passed his uncle without a word. Celine was left alone with the man who'd warned her she was collateral. Taehyun closed the door. The soft click of the latch sounded like a cell locking. He talks to you, Taehyun observed, moving into the library with the controlled grace of something predatory. The doctors said he might never speak again after what he witnessed. What did he witness? Celine asked, though Ji-hoon had already painted the picture in blood and garden soil. Taehyun didn't answer. He reached the table, his gaze dropping to the spread of family documents. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when he saw which files were open. The property acquisitions from 1987, the corporate restructuring of 2003. You have access to the family archives, he said. It wasn't a question. Your brother gave me the credentials. For Ji-hoon's lessons. My brother. Taehyun's voice curdled with something too complex to name. Tell me, Miss Peters, have you noticed anything unusual in these files? Documents that seem out of place? Signatures that look freshly added to decades-old contracts? Celine's mouth went dry. She'd been so focused on creating engaging lessons that she hadn't looked closely. But now that he mentioned it, the 2003 restructuring, she said slowly. The signature page looks newer than the rest of the document. Different paper quality. Observant. Taehyun pulled out the chair across from her, sitting with the deliberate control of someone who'd learned to make every movement count. Young-jae has been using the archive access to create forgeries, changing ownership documents, fabricating debts that never existed, building a paper trail that makes him the rightful heir to properties that were never his. And I'm the perfect scapegoat. A tutor with full archive access, motivated by an affair with the younger son, caught red-handed with the documents when the forgeries are discovered. Taehyun's gaze was surgical, dissecting her layer by layer. You'd take the fall. Young-jae would play the heartbroken victim. The family would close ranks. You'd disappear into the American legal system, if you were lucky. And if I wasn't lucky, Taehyun's silence was answer enough. Celine's hands shook. She pressed them flat against the table, feeling the cool wood anchor her spiraling thoughts. Why are you telling me this? Why warn me? Because Ji-hoon likes you. And what Ji-hoon cares about, I protect. Taehyun leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. And because my brother needs to learn that some things aren't his to destroy. I'm not a thing. No. His gaze intensified, and Celine felt heat flood her face, her throat, her traitorous body. You're not. Which makes you even more dangerous to keep around. The words should have stung. Instead, they felt like recognition. What am I supposed to do? Celine asked. Pretend I don't know? Keep playing Young-jae's girlfriend while he sets me up for... What, fraud? Murder? Yes. Taehyun's response was immediate, brutal. Exactly that. Because if you run now, he'll know someone warned you. He'll accelerate his timeline, and people will die. Possibly starting with you and definitely including Ji-hoon, who's an inconvenient witness to at least 3 of Young-jae's previous cleanups. Celine's stomach heaved. You're asking me to be bait. I'm asking you to be smart. Taehyun stood, buttoning his cuff with meticulous precision. My brother is planning a coup. He needs those forged documents to challenge my father's will, which currently names me as successor. Your archive access is his weapon. Your eventual arrest is his shield. Right now, you're valuable to him. The moment you're not, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. How long do I have? The family's annual board meeting is in 6 weeks. That's when he'll make his move. That's when he'll need you to take the fall. Taehyun moved toward the door, then paused. In the meantime, be the perfect girlfriend. Smile at family dinners. Let him parade you around. And for God's sake, don't let him know you can see the blade behind his back. And what will you be doing while I'm playing target practice? Taehyun looked back at her, and the expression on his scarred face was something between promise and threat. Building a cage strong enough to hold a rabid dog. Even if it's my own brother. He left without another word. Celine sat alone in the library as morning light turned the stained glass into fire, and wondered which was more dangerous, The man who wanted to use her, or the man who wanted to save her. Neither option felt safe, but only one felt inevitable. 3 days passed in careful performance. Celine played her role with the dedication of someone who understood the script had been written in blood. She smiled at young Jay's jokes. She let him hold her hand during the evening walks through gardens that looked beautiful and felt like graveyards. She asked no questions about his late-night meetings or the phone calls he took in Korean, thinking she couldn't understand. She was learning to understand a lot of things. Jihoon's lessons continued in the library, but now Celine paid attention to the documents with new eyes. She photographed nothing, too obvious, but she memorized everything. The dates that didn't align, the signatures that looked too fresh, the property transfers that appeared on pages clearly inserted after original binding. Young Jae had been busy for years, and sloppy, in the way men who thought themselves clever often were. She saw Taehyun only in passing. At breakfast, where his presence turned the meal into silent warfare, or in hallways where his footsteps echoed like countdown timers. He never spoke to her directly, but she felt his attention like a physical weight, protection or surveillance. She couldn't tell. Maybe there was no difference in this house. On the 4th morning, young Jae found her in the solarium, a glass-walled room that jutted from the estate's eastern wing like a crystal tumor. The space was filled with orchids that bloomed in forced perfection, their scent cloying and sweet. "There you are," young Jae said, his smile bright and hollow. "I've been looking everywhere." Celine looked up from the book she'd been pretending to read. "I thought you had meetings all morning. Finished early. Besides, I wanted to give you something." He moved closer, his cologne. Expensive, aggressive, cutting through the orchid perfume. "Close your eyes." Every instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, she smiled and obeyed, feeling his hands guide hers palm up. Something cold and heavy settled against her skin. "Okay, look." The ring sat in her palm like a coiled snake. It was old. Genuinely old. Not the manufactured antique of the estate's carefully curated decor. The band was platinum or white gold, carved with intricate patterns that looked Eastern European rather than Asian. The center stone was a ruby, the color of arterial blood, surrounded by diamonds that caught the morning light and threw it back like warnings. "Young Jae," she breathed, her heart hammering. "This is my grandmother's," he said quickly, taking the ring and sliding it onto her left hand before she could protest. "Well, my great-grandmother's originally. It's been in the family for generations. I want you to have it." The ring fit perfectly. Of course it did. Young Jae had been planning this. "This is too much," Celine said, because a woman surprised by a family heirloom should protest. "I can't possibly." "You can." His hands captured hers, holding the ring in place like shackles disguised as jewelry. "Celine, I know we've only been together a few months, but I've never felt this way about anyone. You're different from the women in my world. You're real, genuine. You see me, not my family name." The words should have been romantic. Instead, they felt like a closing trap. "I see you," she echoed, and meant it in ways he couldn't understand. "This ring is a promise." Young Jae's voice dropped to something intimate, something practiced. "When I take over the family business, when I'm finally free from my father's shadow and my brother's rules, I want you beside me, not as a girlfriend, as my wife." Celine's throat closed. She'd suspected he was using her, framing her, setting her up for destruction. But marriage? That was a level of commitment that made no sense unless he needed her legally bound to him, unable to testify, complicit in everything he'd built. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "Say yes." His grip tightened, just shy of painful. "Say you'll wait for me. Say you trust me to build us a life away from all this." He gestured to the estate beyond the glass walls, and something bitter twisted his handsome face. "Away from my family's judgment. Away from Taehyun's disapproval. Just us, starting fresh." The fantasy was elaborate. The lie was exquisite. "Yes," Celine heard herself say. "Yes, I'll wait." Young Jae's smile blazed with triumph. He pulled her into a kiss that tasted like possession and victory, his hands claiming her waist with the certainty of ownership. Celine kissed him back, and felt nothing but cold calculation. When he finally pulled away, slightly breathless, she forced herself to look down at the ring with appropriate wonder. "It's beautiful, but are you sure your grandmother won't mind? This seems like something that should stay in the family." "You are family now," young Jae interrupted. "Besides, Halmione is traditional. She'll love that I'm following proper courting steps. Trust me, this makes everything easier." "Easier for whom?" Celine didn't ask. Youngjae's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression flickering to annoyance before smoothing back to charm. I have to take this. Business. But wear the ring, okay? Let everyone see that you're mine. Mine. The word hung in the air like smoke after he left. Celine looked down at the ring, at the way the ruby caught light like captured fire. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was, that ring doesn't belong to this family. She spun. Taehyun stood in the solarium's doorway, his silhouette dark against the bright hallway behind him. He moved toward her with that predator's grace, his focus locked on her hand with an intensity that made her skin prickle. What? Give me your hand. It wasn't a request. Celine found herself obeying before conscious thought caught up. Taehyun captured her wrist, his grip firm, his calloused fingers warm against her pulse point, and pulled her hand into the light. He studied the ring for 3 long seconds. Then he cursed in Korean, low and vicious. This is the Volkov ruby, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. It belonged to the Volkov Bratva before they were absorbed into the Russo family operations 15 years ago. It's been missing since the merger, presumed stolen during the transition. If you're caught wearing this, I'm the thief. Celine finished, her stomach plummeting. Just like you said. Youngjae puts evidence on me. Then when it's discovered, you're arrested for grand larceny and trafficking in stolen goods. International charges, federal jurisdiction, you disappear into the system for years. Taehyun's thumb pressed against her pulse, checking her heart rate or trying to calm it, she couldn't tell. And Youngjae gets to play the devastated boyfriend who was fooled by the con artist. The family rallies around him. His gambling debts to the Russo family are forgiven because he recovered their stolen heirloom. He's the hero, and I'm a cautionary tale. Taehyun's eyes lifted from the ring to her face, and the intensity there stole her breath. About what happens when outsiders try to infiltrate families they don't understand. Celine tried to pull her hand back. Taehyun held firm. Why are you telling me this? She demanded, anger finally cutting through fear. If you know all this, if you've known what he's planning, why let him keep? Because I need him to commit fully to his play, Taehyun interrupted. I need him confident, arrogant, convinced he's won. A cornered animal is dangerous. An animal that thinks it's free? His mouth curved into something too dark to be a smile. That's when you capture it permanently. I'm not an animal. I'm a person. And I'm not your bait. Celine yanked her hand back with enough force that Taehyun let her go, his fingers trailing across her palm in a way that sent electricity up her arm. No, he agreed quietly. You're not bait. You're an investment. And I protect my investments. I'm not yours to protect. Aren't you? Taehyun moved closer, and Celine's back hit the glass wall behind her. Cold. Unforgiving. Nowhere to retreat. You're living in my family's house, teaching my nephew, wearing stolen property that will be traced back to this estate. You think you can just walk away? The moment you leave, Youngjae accelerates. The moment you run, people die. You're in this, Miss Peters. The only question is whether you survive it. He was close enough now that she could see the fine scars on his throat, the ones that disappeared beneath his collar, close enough that his cologne, cedar and smoke, nothing like Youngjae's aggressive sweetness, made her head swim. What do you want from me? She whispered. I want you to keep the ring on, Taehyun said. I want you to smile and play the happy bride-to-be. I want you to be everything my brother thinks you are. Naive, grateful, desperate to belong. And then, when he makes his move at the board meeting, when he presents his forged documents and his carefully constructed case for why he should lead this family, you're going to be my witness. You're going to testify to exactly what he's done, what he's made you complicit in. You're going to help me destroy him. Celine's laugh was bitter. You want me to betray him? I want you to choose survival. Taehyun's hand came up, not touching her but bracketing her against the glass. One palm flat against the window beside her head, caging without contact. Youngjae chose his path years ago. He chose ambition over honor, greed over family, violence over mercy. You still have a choice. You can be his victim, or you can be my weapon. Some choice. It's the only one you have. His voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost regretful. I'm sorry you walked into this. I'm sorry my brother is what he is. I'm sorry you ever met him. But I can't change the past. I can only control the endgame. And in this endgame, where do I end up? Taehyun's gaze dropped to her mouth. Just for a second. Just long enough to make heat flood her cheeks, before snapping back to her eyes. Alive, he said simply. Everything else, We figure out after. He pushed off the glass and stepped back, giving her space to breathe. Celine's lungs filled with orchid-scented air that tasted like funeral flowers. The ring stays on, Taehyun repeated. You tell no one. Not your mother. Not your friends. Absolutely not, Young Jae. You play the part. You wait. And when the time comes, you stand with me. Understand? Celine looked down at the ring. At the ruby that was really a time bomb wrapped in platinum. Do I have a choice? Everyone has a choice, Miss Peters. Taehyun moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. Some are just bloodier than others. He left her alone in the glass room, surrounded by forced blooms and impossible decisions. Celine lifted her hand, watching the ruby catch light and throw it back in crimson fractals. On her finger, it looked like a wound, like a promise written in someone else's blood. She wondered whose blood would pay the price when this was over. She was terrified it might be her own. Sunday dinner at the Choi estate was apparently a sacred ritual, like prayer or sacrifice. Celine had been at the house for a week now. Too long, every instinct screamed, but Young Jae had convinced her to extend her stay, just a few more days, with promises of weekend trips and romantic evenings that never quite materialized. He was busy. Always busy, with meetings and phone calls and late-night disappearances that left her alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling and counting exit routes she wasn't sure she'd ever use. The ring sat heavy on her finger. She'd tried taking it off once, in the privacy of her room, and found the platinum had been sized so precisely that removal required soap and determination. A ring that didn't come off easily. How thoughtful. Taehyun's warning echoed in her head. Asterisk, play the part. Smile. Wait. Asterisk. She was getting dangerously good at all three. The formal dining room had been set for 23 people. She'd counted while helping Ji-hoon with his pre-dinner etiquette review. The table stretched like an accusation, each place setting a small fortune in porcelain and silver. Fresh flowers, white lilies, because Heejin preferred them, stood in crystal vases that caught candlelight, and made the whole room feel like a shrine, or a stage. Celine wore a simple navy dress that Young Jae had approved that morning, his hands lingering on her waist as he'd murmured about how beautiful she looked. The dress was elegant, appropriate, exactly what a guest of honor should wear. Except she was starting to realize she wasn't a guest. She just didn't know what she actually was. The family arrived in waves. Aunts and uncles she was still trying to differentiate, cousins whose names blurred together, Soojin with her husband and 2 children who looked uncomfortable in formal wear. Ji-hoon appeared with his parents, a quiet couple Celine had barely spoken to, both of them looking perpetually exhausted in the way of people trapped in a machine they couldn't stop. Young Jae kept her close, his hand proprietarily on her lower back, introducing her with phrases like, "My Celine, and the woman I've been telling you about." Each introduction felt like a claim being staked. Heejin presided from her seat like an empress holding court. She'd nodded at Celine with something that might have been approval or might have been calculation. Impossible to tell. Sang-woo sat at the table's head, jovial and expansive, pouring wine and making jokes that everyone laughed at on cue. He'd winked at Celine when she entered, gestured to the ring on her finger, and called out something in Korean. Young Jae just smiled, offering a non-committal nod that neither confirmed nor denied the ring's provenance. Taehyun arrived last. The room didn't go silent this time. Too many people, too much noise, but Celine felt the shift in atmosphere like a pressure change before lightning. He wore all black, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled to reveal those inked forearms. He looked like violence dressed for dinner. His eyes found hers across the room, held for 3 seconds, then moved on. She felt that look in her chest, her stomach, lower. Dinner was served in courses that felt like tests. Celine navigated the meal with the careful attention of someone who knew she was being evaluated. She ate what was put in front of her. She laughed at appropriate moments. She answered questions about her tutoring work with Ji-hoon, carefully steering conversation away from anything substantive about the family itself. She was seated between Young Jae and an uncle who spoke no English, which meant she was functionally isolated despite being surrounded by people. Young Jae kept his hand on her thigh under the table, a constant, possessive pressure that made her want to scream. Across the table, Taehyun ate in silence, his focus seemingly on his plate. But twice she'd glanced up to find him watching her with an intensity that made her silverware clatter. Halfway through the 3rd course, Sang-woo stood, raising his wine glass. "A toast," he announced in English, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. "To family, to tradition, to the continued success of everything our grandfather built." Everyone raised their glasses. Celine started to do the same. "Celine," Sang-woo continued, and her hand froze. While you're here, would you mind getting the water pitcher from the sideboard? I think several of us are running low. The request was pleasant, casual, delivered with a smile. The table went silent. Celine's stomach plummeted. She looked at Youngjae, waiting for him to laugh it off, to make a joke about his father's old-fashioned ways, to say literally anything that would clarify this was some kind of misunderstanding. Youngjae smiled at her, encouraging. The pitcher's just behind you. Beautiful. Heavy, so be careful. The world tilted. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't even really Youngjae's girlfriend, not in the eyes of his family. She was staff. Heat flooded her face. Shame, fury, humiliation, braiding together into something choking. Every eye at the table was on her, waiting. The aunt beside her looked sympathetic. Sujin looked pained. Haejin looked satisfied, like a test had just been passed. Celine's hands shook as she set down her wine glass. She could refuse. She could walk out. She could make a scene that would echo through this family for generations. Instead, she stood with as much dignity as she could salvage, moved to the sideboard, and lifted the heavy crystal pitcher with hands that wanted to throw it through the nearest window. She made it to Sang-woo's end of the table, started to pour. The sound of shattering glass exploded through the dining room. Celine jumped, water sloshing from the pitcher. Every head swiveled toward the source. Taehyun sat with his hands still curled around the stem of his wine glass, or what remained of it. The bowl had shattered completely, crystal fragments glittering on the white tablecloth like diamonds, red wine spreading like blood. His hand was cut, crimson running down his wrist, dripping onto his plate. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared at his father with an expression of absolute contempt. Taehyun, Haejin said sharply. Apologies. Taehyun's voice was soft, lethal. The glass was flawed, weak stem, poor craftsmanship. His eyes never left his father's face. Someone should have noticed before putting it on the table. The words weren't about the glass. Minji, Taehyun called to one of the household staff, a woman in her 50s who'd been standing by the kitchen door. He spoke in Korean, his tone gentle compared to the violence of the shattered glass. The woman hurried forward, and Taehyun gestured to Celine, still frozen with the pitcher, still standing at his father's elbow like a servant. Minji took the pitcher from Celine's hands with a quick, respectful bow. Then she gestured to Celine's seat, her meaning clear. Asterisk. Sit. You don't serve here. Asterisk. Celine moved back to her chair on autopilot, her entire body numb. Youngjae reached for her hand under the table, squeezing. You okay? He whispered. Sorry about that. Father's just old-fashioned. He doesn't mean anything by it. Celine looked at him. At this man she'd kissed, believed, almost loved, and saw a stranger. Someone who'd watched her be humiliated and done nothing. Someone who'd smiled while his father reduced her to help. Of course, she heard herself say. I understand. But across the table, Taehyun was wrapping his bleeding hand in a napkin, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with something that looked like fury and tasted like protection. And Celine understood, suddenly and completely, what he'd meant when he said she had to choose. Youngjae had made his choice. He'd chosen himself, his status, his family's approval over any pretense of defending her dignity. Taehyun had shattered glass and bled rather than let the humiliation stand unchallenged. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Celine ate nothing, tasted nothing, heard nothing. She was drowning in realizations that hit like waves. She was alone here, expendable, nothing but a pawn in Youngjae's game and a weapon in Taehyun's war. When dessert was finally cleared and people began to drift away, Celine excused herself, claiming exhaustion. Youngjae barely noticed, already deep in conversation with his cousins about something that made them laugh too loudly. She made it to the hallway before her composure cracked. The guest bathroom was mercifully empty. Celine locked the door and braced her hands against the marble sink, staring at her reflection in the gilt-edged mirror. Her makeup was still perfect. Her hair was still smooth. She looked exactly like she had an hour ago, but everything had changed. She'd been fooling herself, thinking she could navigate this, thinking she could play along with Taehyun's plan and somehow emerge unscathed. She wasn't sophisticated enough for this world, wasn't hard enough for these games. She was a girl from the Bronx who taught yoga and tutored rich kids, and she'd stumbled into something that was going to destroy her. The ring on her finger felt like a shackle. Miss Peters. Celine's head snapped up. Taehyun stood in the bathroom doorway, which was impossible because she'd locked it, except there were probably master keys in this house, probably a dozen ways in and out of every room because nothing was truly private in a place built on secrets. Get out, she said, her voice breaking. Taehyun stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The bathroom was too small for his presence, the walls pressing in. He'd unwrapped his hand. The cuts had stopped bleeding, just thin red lines across his palm now. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" "Yes." The word was simple, absolute. Celine laughed, the sound bitter and ragged. "Your father just made me serve wine like hired help while your brother smiled and watched. And you want to know if I'm all right? I'm living in a nightmare. I'm wearing a stolen ring. I'm apparently engaged to a man who sees me as a useful idiot. So no, I'm not all right. I'm the furthest thing from all right." Taehyun was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're not a useful idiot. You're a liability he's trying to control. There's a difference. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you angry." Taehyun moved closer, his voice dropping. "You should be furious. You should be plotting revenge. You should be—" "What? Like you?" Celine shoved at his chest, her hands hitting solid muscle. "You're so busy protecting the family name and playing three-dimensional chess with your psychopath brother that you forgot I'm not a game piece. I'm a person. I had a life. I had a business. I had safety," Taehyun finished. "You had safety, and I took that from you the moment I let my brother near you." The admission hung between them. "You knew," Celine whispered. "This whole time you knew what he was, and you let him." "I didn't know he'd choose you." Taehyun's hands came up, bracketing her against the sink without touching. "I thought he'd pick someone from his usual circle. Someone who understood the stakes. I didn't expect him to find someone kind enough to reach my nephew, smart enough to threaten him, real enough to make me—" He stopped, cut himself off like he'd revealed too much. "Make you what?" Celine demanded. Taehyun's jaw worked. His eyes, God, his eyes were so dark, so close, so full of things she couldn't name. "Make me want to burn it all down to keep you safe." The bathroom was suddenly airless. "You don't even know me," Celine managed. "I know you teach a traumatized child with patience and kindness. I know you haven't run screaming despite having every reason to. I know you're brave enough to stand in a room full of predators and still maintain your dignity." His hand lifted, hesitated, then settled against her cheek. Warm, calused, impossibly gentle. "I know you deserve better than this family. Better than my brother. Better than me. Then let me go." "I can't." His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Celine felt that touch everywhere. "Not until it's safe. Not until I know he can't hurt you. Not until—" "Not until what?" Taehyun's gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, lifted back to her eyes with visible effort. "Not until I stop being selfish enough to keep you close." Celine's breath caught. This was wrong. This was insane. This was— "I hate you," she whispered. "Good." Taehyun's hand slid from her cheek to cup the back of her neck, his fingers threading through her hair. "Hate me. Blame me. Just don't forgive my brother. Don't let him make you doubt yourself. What happened tonight wasn't about you. It was about him establishing control. And what is this?" Celine gestured between them, at the impossible tension crackling in the air. "What are you establishing?" "Alliance," Taehyun said roughly. "Or at least, that's what I'm trying to convince myself this is. And what is it really?" His forehead dropped to rest against hers. Just a point of contact, just shared breath in a too small space. "A mistake I can't stop making." Someone knocked on the bathroom door. "Miss Peters? Are you unwell?" The spell shattered. Taehyun stepped back, his hand falling away, his expression smoothing into that blank mask he wore so well. He moved to the door, unlocked it, stepped into the hallway. "She's fine," he told whoever was outside. "Minji," Celine saw over his shoulder. "Just overwhelmed. I was checking on her at my grandmother's request." The lie was smooth, practiced, completely believable. Minji nodded, satisfied, and disappeared. Taehyun looked back at Celine one last time. 6 weeks, he said quietly. "Hold on for 6 weeks. Then this ends. And what happens to me when it does?" "Whatever you want," Taehyun said. "I promise." He left before she could ask if he was a man who kept promises. Celine stood alone in the bathroom, her reflection staring back at her with kiss-swollen lips. She hadn't realized he'd come close enough to almost taste, and wondered which brother was the real danger, the one who wanted to use her, or the one who wanted to save her. Both felt equally capable of destroying everything she'd ever been. 3 weeks passed in a slow-motion nightmare. Celine stopped marking days and started counting meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, each one a performance she was getting dangerously good at. Young Jae grew more attentive as his coup approached, more affectionate, more possessive. His touches lingered. His kisses tasted like ambition masked in sweetness. He talked about their future with the conviction of a man reading lines he'd rehearsed. She smiled. She agreed. She wore the stolen ring and played the role of besotted girlfriend with an expertise that frightened her. At night, alone in her room, she cried silent tears into silk pillowcases and planned escape routes she knew she'd never use. Not yet. Not until Taehyun's carefully constructed trap was sprung. Not until she could walk away knowing Ji-hoon was safe. The boy had become her anchor. His lessons were the only genuine thing in this house of mirrors. He spoke more now. Whole sentences sometimes. Usually about dinosaurs or space or the uncomfortable questions that children asked when they hadn't yet learned to perform. "Do you love Uncle Youngjae?" He'd asked once, his voice careful. "I care about him," Solan had answered. Because the truth, I don't know who he really is, would terrify them both. Uncle Taehyun says caring and loving are different. Ji-hoon had looked up at her with those two old eyes. He says love means you'd bleed for someone. Caring just means you'd prefer they didn't bleed on you. The philosophy of a man raised in violence. Celine saw Taehyun in fragments, at meals, in hallways. Once in the library when she'd arrived early and found him reading in Korean. His profile stark against the morning light. They didn't speak beyond pleasantries when others were present, but sometimes she'd feel his attention like heat against her skin. Turn, and catch him watching with an expression that made her forget to breathe. The board meeting loomed. 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1. And then, on a Tuesday morning when spring light made the breakfast room look almost innocent, everything accelerated. Selene had learned the morning routine. Haejin took tea at 7 sharp, Korean green tea, prepared a specific way, served in the porcelain cup that had belonged to her mother. It was a ritual, a meditation, a daily affirmation of tradition. Youngjae had suggested, 2 days ago, that Selene prepare it. A gesture, he'd said, to show respect, to prove you're learning our ways. It had felt like a test. Of course it was a test. Selene had spent an afternoon learning the proper method from Min-ji. The water temperature, the steeping time, the way to pour without disrupting the leaves. She'd practiced until her hands memorized the movements. This morning, she prepared the tea alone in the small service kitchen. The house was quiet, most of the family still asleep. Min-ji supervised from the doorway, nodding approval as Selene measured and poured. The tray was perfect. The cup steamed gently. The morning light through the windows made everything look clean, simple, safe. Selene carried it to the breakfast room where Haejin sat reading a Korean newspaper, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Sang-woo sat at the table's head, scrolling through his phone. 2 uncles Selene couldn't name were discussing something in rapid Korean. "Your tea, Mrs. Choi," Selene said softly, setting the cup beside Haejin's elbow. Haejin looked up, surprised. "You prepared this?" "Yes, ma'am. I hope it's acceptable." Something that might have been approval flickered across the older woman's face. "Sit, child. Have your own breakfast." It felt like acceptance. Like progress. Selene sat, accepting coffee from Min-ji, feeling warmth bloom in her chest. Maybe she was paranoid. Maybe Youngjae was just ambitious, not murderous. Maybe... Sang-woo lifted Haejin's teacup, taking a sip of his mother's tea in that casual way family members did. He smiled at Selene. "Well done. This is..." The words died. His face went gray. The cup fell from his hand, shattering on the marble floor, tea spreading like floodwater. Sang-woo grabbed his throat, his eyes bulging, foam starting to form at the corners of his mouth. Haejin screamed. The uncles lunged from their chairs, and Selene sat frozen, watching the head of the Choi family collapse, seizures racking his body as the poison. Poison. There was poison. How was there poison? Did its work? The room exploded into chaos. Someone shouted for a doctor. Someone else grabbed their phone, calling emergency services in panicked Korean. Haejin was on the floor beside her son, cradling his head, screaming at him to stay awake. Selene couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her hands shook violently as her mind tried to process what she was seeing. She'd made that tea. Her hands, her measurements. Oh God. The breakfast room doors slammed open. Security poured in. 4 men in suits with guns already drawn. One of them grabbed Selene, yanking her from her chair with enough force to dislocate her shoulder. She cried out, dropped to her knees, tasted blood where her teeth cut her lip. "She made the tea," someone shouted in English. "She poisoned him." "No," Selene gasped. "No, I didn't. I wouldn't." A gun pressed against the back of her head. Cold, unforgiving. "Wait." Heijin's voice cut through the chaos. Don't you dare. Not until we know. I saw her. Youngjae's voice. Celine's head snapped up, and there he was in the doorway, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair mussed from sleep, his face a perfect mask of shock and grief. I was coming down for coffee. I saw her in the service kitchen. She was adding something to the tea. I thought it was honey. Oh my God, Celine, what did you do? The performance was flawless. You're lying, Celine said, her voice breaking. Youngjae, please, I didn't. I'm sorry. He looked at her with eyes full of false tears. I'm so sorry. I wanted to believe you were different. But you were using me, getting close to steal from us. And now my father. Shut up, Celine screamed. You set me up. You gave me the ring. You suggested I make the tea. The gun pressed harder against her skull. Shut your mouth, or I will end you here. Where's the teapot? Another voice, sharp with authority. Celine didn't recognize the man. Older, gray-haired, dressed in a suit despite the early hour. If she poisoned the tea, the pot should still be contaminated. Minji hurried from the service kitchen, carrying the pot on a tray. Here, sir. She used this. Don't touch it directly. The man took the pot with a cloth. We'll need it tested. In the meantime, she stays exactly where she is until we know what happened to my son. Heijin stood, her face carved from stone, the grief and fury making her look ancient and terrible. If he dies, she dies. Slowly. Do you understand me, girl? Celine understood. She understood that Youngjae had poisoned his own father, framed her perfectly, and was about to watch her be executed for his crime. Let her go. Every head turned. Taehyun stood in the doorway. He was dressed, unlike his brother. Full suit, like he'd been awake for hours. His face was blank, emotionless, but his eyes burned with something that made the security holding Selene take an involuntary step back. Taehyun, Heijin said. Your father? I know. Taehyun moved into the room with that controlled grace, his focus flicking to his father's prone form, still breathing, barely, before settling on Celine. I also know that teapot isn't the source. What? Youngjae's voice climbed with performative confusion. What are you talking about? She made the tea. You saw what you wanted me to think you saw, Taehyun interrupted, his voice cutting. But you made a mistake, little brother. Father didn't drink from the pot. He drank from mother's cup. The poison wasn't in the tea. It was in the cup itself. Silence. That's insane, Youngjae said. Why would... Miss Peters has been here 3 weeks. She's been supervised in every kitchen, every room, every moment. She has no access to purchase poison, no knowledge of our family routines beyond what you've told her, and absolutely no motive to harm father, whose goodwill she'd need if she were actually trying to marry into this family. Taehyun's logic was surgical, precise. But someone who wanted to frame her? Someone who had access to mother's personal china? Someone who suggested she prepare tea this specific morning? His gaze locked on his brother. That person had motive, means, and opportunity. You're insane. Youngjae's performance was cracking. You think I'd hurt my own father? I think you'd burn the world to take his throne. Taehyun gestured to the gray-haired man. Director Kim, test the pot. You'll find it clean. Then test the cup. You'll find it soaked in enough poison to kill 3 men. And then check the security footage from mother's room last night. You'll see someone entered at 2 a.m. to tamper with her china cabinet. This is ridiculous, Youngjae said, but he was backing toward the door. I don't have to listen. You'll stay where you are. Heijin's voice was frost. Director Kim, do as Taehyun says, now. The next 10 minutes passed in suspended horror. Paramedics arrived, rushing Sang-woo toward the ambulance. Director Kim ran tests with equipment Selene didn't recognize. The security team pulled up footage on tablets, their expressions darkening as they watched. And Taehyun did something insane. He picked up the teapot, the one that supposedly held poison, and before anyone could stop him, poured the remaining tea into a clean cup and drank it down in 3 long swallows. Taehyun! Heijin lunged forward. He held up a hand, stopping her. If the tea is poisoned, we'll know in minutes. If it's not... He looked at Celine, still on her knees with a gun at her head. Then someone needs to face justice for what they've done. You fucking idiot, Youngjae hissed. You absolute. The footage is clear. Director Kim's voice was grim. He turned his tablet to show Heijin. This person entered Madam's room at 2:14 a.m. They went directly to the china cabinet. They removed the teacup, applied something to the interior, and replaced it. The face is clear. Hae-jin looked at the screen. Her face went white, then red, then something beyond rage. Young-jae, she said softly. Come here. Mother, I can explain. Come. Here. Young-jae's performance shattered. He bolted for the door. He made it 3 steps before Taehyun's security tackled him to the marble floor with enough force to crack bone. Young-jae screamed. Fury, not pain. Thrashing and cursing in Korean. The gun left Celine's head. She collapsed forward, gasping, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Hands lifted her gently. Taehyun's hands. He pulled her to her feet, steadying her when her legs threatened to give out. Breathe, he said quietly. Just breathe. It's over. You drank the tea, Celine gasped. You could have died. If you were wrong, I wasn't wrong. His hands cupped her face, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. I've been tracking his movements for weeks. I knew he'd make his move before the board meeting. I knew he'd use you. His jaw tightened. I didn't think he'd try to kill our father to do it. You could have warned me. If I'd warned you, your reaction wouldn't have been genuine. He'd have known something was wrong. Taehyun's thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away tears she hadn't realized she'd cried. I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. Across the room, Hae-jin stood over her younger son with an expression that made everyone in the room take an involuntary step back. Get him out of my sight, she said. Lock him in the cellar, call the family council, and someone tell me if my eldest son is about to die from his own stupidity. I'm fine, Taehyun called out, not looking away from Celine. The tea was clean. I knew it would be. You times new asterisk, Hae-jin repeated. And yet you let your father drink. Father drank from the wrong cup. That wasn't part of the plan. Taehyun finally released Celine, turning to face his grandmother. Young-jae was supposed to discover the poison before anyone drank. He was supposed to be the hero who saved you, proving his worth before the board meeting. Celine was supposed to be arrested, discredited, disappeared. But father grabbed your cup on impulse, and Young-jae panicked and improvised. How long have you known? Hae-jin demanded. That he was planning a coup? Months. That he'd try to frame Miss Peters specifically? 3 weeks. That he'd attempt murder? Taehyun's voice went hard. Since last night, when I hacked his laptop and found his communications with the Russo family's chemist. Hae-jin stared at her grandson for a long, loaded moment. Then she nodded. We'll discuss your methods later. For now, get that girl cleaned up and somewhere safe. She looks like she's about to collapse. Celine realized the older woman was right. The room was tilting, her vision going gray at the edges. She'd been seconds from execution. She'd watched a man convulse from poison meant to frame her for murder. I've got you. Taehyun's arm wrapped around her waist, taking her weight as her knees finally gave out. Don't you dare faint. Stay with me. Celine, look at me. She tried. The room was spinning, sounds becoming muffled and distant. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Taehyun's voice, rough with something that sounded like fear. Touch her, and I kill you all. Then nothing. Just the black and blessed silence, and the ghost of warmth where his hands had been. Celine woke to silence, the kind that pressed against eardrums like deep water. Her body ached everywhere, muscles she didn't know she had screaming protest. The fainting had been real, the terror absolute, and now she was paying the price in every joint and tendon. The room swam into focus slowly. Not her guest room. Somewhere smaller, darker, heavy with the scent of sandalwood and something medicinal that burned her nostrils. Candles flickered in brass holders, casting shadows that moved like living things across walls lined with wooden tablets carved in Korean characters she couldn't read. The ancestral shrine. She tried to sit up and failed, her head spinning. Don't. The voice came from the shadows, rough as gravel. You'll make yourself sick again. Taehyun emerged from the corner where he'd been sitting. Sitting, not standing, which meant he'd been watching her sleep. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it settled something in her chest that had been screaming since the breakfast room. He looked different in the candlelight. Softer somehow, though that word felt wrong for a man built from sharp edges and controlled violence. He'd changed from his suit into loose black pants and a simple white shirt, the kind of clothing that should have looked casual but on him felt like a weapon sheathed. How long was I out? Her voice came out sandpaper rough. 4 hours. The doctor checked you. Shock, exhaustion, dehydration. Nothing poisoned, in case you were worried. He moved closer, settling on the edge of the low platform where she lay on silk cushions. Though I'm told you fought him when he tried to give you a sedative, called him a Russian bastard and threatened to bite. Heat flooded her face. I don't remember that. Good. It's one of the more colorful moments of your day. His hand lifted, hesitated, then settled against her forehead. Checking for fever, she told herself. Except his palm lingered, his thumb brushing her temple with a gentleness that made her throat close. You scared the hell out of me. I scared you? You drank potentially poisoned tea. You could have died. I knew it was clean. His hand slid from her forehead to cup her jaw, tilting her face toward the candlelight. His eyes searched hers with an intensity that felt invasive and necessary all at once. I've been tracking Young Jae's movements for months. I knew he'd contaminate the cup, not the pot. The pot was your work, earnest, careful, exactly to specifications. He couldn't risk that being perfect and failing to poison father, so he went directly to the source. But you didn't know for certain. What if you were wrong? Then I would have died proving your innocence. He said it simply, like it was obvious, like his life was a reasonable trade for hers. Better me than you. Why? The word broke. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Taehoon's jaw tightened. His hand fell away, and he stood, pacing to the altar, where photographs of stern-faced ancestors stared down with judgment. Because Jihoon trusts you. Because you're innocent in this nightmare my family created. Because watching you be executed for my brother's sins would have destroyed something in me I didn't know I had left. What? He turned back, and in the candlelight, his scars looked like war paint, the belief that some things are still worth protecting. Selen's chest ached. She pushed herself up to sitting, ignoring the way the room tilted. Taehoon, you should go back to your room. His voice had gone flat, controlled. Rest. In the morning, we'll discuss getting you somewhere safe. Young Jae's been arrested, but his allies are still... No. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing. No? I'm not leaving. Celine forced herself to stand, her legs shaking but holding. You drank poison for me. You shattered your family to save me. You think I'm going to run now? Yes. He moved toward her with that predator grace, closing the distance until she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Because staying makes you a target. Young Jae has allies, debts, people who will come for revenge. You're safer far away from this house, this family, from me. I don't want safe. The words came out fierce, surprising them both. I want justice. I want to see this through. I want... What? Taehyun's hands came up to frame her face, his grip just shy of bruising. What do you want, Celine? You, she thought. I want you, and that's insane, and I don't care. Instead, she lifted her hand to his chest, feeling his heart hammer against her palm. I want to stop being afraid. I want to stop feeling powerless. I want... His mouth crashed against hers, cutting off words, thoughts, sanity. The kiss was nothing like the careful seduction she'd experienced with Young Jae. This was claim and conquest, desperation wrapped in fury. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the angle, his tongue sweeping past her parted lips with an aggression that should have frightened her. She met him with equal ferocity, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, needing to feel something real after days of performance and lies. He tasted like smoke and dark promises, like danger she wanted to drown in. His teeth caught her lower lip, not quite biting, testing. She gasped against his mouth, and he gentled immediately, the kiss shifting from attack to something deeper, more devastating. His hands slid from her hair to her waist, pulling her flush against him until every hard plane of his body pressed against hers. Celine. Her name in his mouth was prayer and curse. We can't. You don't understand what this means. Then tell me. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, her hands still fisted in his shirt. Tell me why you're looking at me like you want to devour me and protect me at the same time. Because in this family there's no difference. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, his breath ragged. We destroy what we love. We consume it. My grandfather loved my grandmother so much he killed 3 men who looked at her wrong. My father loved my mother until she couldn't breathe without his permission. Love in the Choi family isn't soft. It's obsession with a body count. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. But his hands tightened on her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. I've killed for less than what I feel when I look at you. I've burned down empires for slights that pale compared to what Young Jae tried to do. If you stay, if you let this happen, I will own you, completely. Is that what you want? Celine's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational part of her brain screamed to run, to get out while she still could. But rationality had abandoned her somewhere between poisoned teacups and stolen rings. Yes, she whispered. Yes, that's what I want. The sound he made was something between growl and prayer. Then he was kissing her again, walking her backward until her legs hit the platform. They fell together into silk cushions, his weight pressing her down, his hands mapping her body like territory he was claiming. She arched into him, her own hands exploring the landscape of muscle and scar tissue beneath his shirt. He was all heat and controlled power, every movement calculated even in passion. His mouth left hers to trail down her throat, teeth scraping against her pulse point. "Say my name." His voice was rough against her skin. "I need to hear you say it. Taehyun." She threaded her fingers through his hair, pulling him back to her mouth. "Taehyun, please." The sound of footsteps in the hallway shattered the moment. Taehyun was off her in an instant, his body between her and the door, his hand reaching for something at his back. A gun, she realized distantly. He had a gun tucked into his waistband. "It's Min-ji," came a woman's voice through the door. Korean, respectful, urgent. A rapid exchange followed that Celine couldn't parse. Taehyun's posture relaxed fractionally. He responded in Korean, his tone commanding, then turned back to Celine. "Your mother is on the phone. She's been calling the estate repeatedly, threatening to contact the police if she doesn't speak to you immediately." Reality crashed back like cold water. Celine scrambled up, smoothing her dress, her hair, trying to erase evidence of what had almost happened. I need to talk to her." Selene. Taehyun caught her wrist as she moved toward the door. "This conversation isn't finished." She looked back at him. This dangerous, beautiful man who'd nearly died for her, who'd kissed her like salvation and damnation wrapped together. "I know. When this is over, when Youngjae is dealt with permanently, you'll have a choice to make." His grip tightened. "Stay or run. But understand, if you stay, you're mine. No half measures, no safety net. Just us and whatever comes after. And if I run," his smile was blade sharp, "then I'll let you go. Once. But if you ever come back, even years from now, even by accident, I will never let you leave again. That's the only mercy I can promise." Celine pulled her wrist free, her heart hammering. "That's not mercy. That's a threat. In this family," Taehyun said softly. "They're the same thing." She left him standing in the shrine room, surrounded by ancestors who'd probably built their empires on similar threats disguised as promises. And the terrifying part? She was already calculating how to stay. 48 hours after the poisoning, the estate felt like a mausoleum. Youngjae had been locked in the cellar, a prison disguised as wine storage, all stone walls and iron doors that didn't open from the inside. Sangwoo remained hospitalized, stable but unconscious, his survival uncertain. The family council had been summoned from Seoul, New York, and San Francisco. Converging like sharks scenting blood, Celine existed in a strange limbo. She was no longer a prisoner, but she wasn't free either. Guards followed her at a distance, ostensibly for protection. But the locked doors and monitored phone calls told a different story. She was leverage, insurance, a witness who knew too much to be released, and too useful to be silenced. She'd seen Taehyun only in passing, at a distance, surrounded by men in expensive suits speaking rapid Korean she couldn't follow. He was orchestrating something, building a case, preparing for war. Each time their eyes met across crowded rooms, the air charged with everything unsaid. The kiss in the shrine room burned between them like a brand. On the third morning, Youngjae escaped. Celine learned about it from Ji-hoon, who appeared in her room pale and shaking, his tablet clutched to his chest. "Uncle Youngjae is gone. The guards are looking everywhere. Uncle Taehyun is very angry." The house erupted into controlled chaos. Men in dark suits spoke urgently into phones. Vehicles screamed down the driveway. Haejin's voice carried from the main hall, sharp with command and fury. Celine was ordered to stay in her room. She lasted 20 minutes before cabin fever drove her to attempt the door. Unlocked, surprisingly. She made it to the library before a guard intercepted her. One of Taehyun's men, young and nervous. "Miss Peters, you should return. I need to speak with Taehyun. Mr. Choi is unavailable. Security protocols require." A phone rang. The guard answered, his expression shifting to confusion, then alarm. He thrust the phone at Celine. "For you." "Hello?" "Celine." Youngjae's voice, warm and familiar and utterly wrong. "Thank God. Are you okay? Has Taehyun hurt you?" Her blood went cold. "What? I know you must be terrified. I know my brother has you convinced I'm some kind of monster. But please listen. The family is in danger. The Russo syndicate is coming for revenge over that ring. My father's dying because I tried to protect him from their poison, not hurt him. Taehyun is using you as bait to draw them out." The lies were masterful, delivered with desperate sincerity. "Youngjae, that's not... I can get you out." There's a service entrance on the east wing, third door past the kitchen. No cameras. Meet me there in 10 minutes. I have a car, cash, everything we need. We can disappear, start over, just like I promised. Why would I trust you? His voice cracked with performative emotion. Because despite everything, I still love you. Because you're in danger as long as you're in that house. Because in 10 minutes, the Russo family is going to breach the perimeter, and everyone inside becomes collateral damage. Celine's mind raced. This was obviously a trap. Young Jae wanted her for leverage, for insurance, maybe to tie up a loose end. But Taehyun had also taught her something in their brief, intense encounters. Sometimes the only way to spring a trap was to walk into it willingly. The East Wing service entrance, she repeated. 10 minutes. Thank you. God, thank you. I'll keep you safe, I promise. He hung up. The guard stared at her, uncertain. Miss Peters, get Taehyun, Celine said quietly. Tell him Young Jae just called. Tell him I'm meeting him at the East Wing entrance in 8 minutes. You can't possibly be. 7 minutes now. Move. The guard bolted. Celine didn't wait to see if the message would reach Taehyun in time. She moved through the house with purpose, mapping the route in her head. The East Wing was older, part of the original structure before the renovations. She'd explored it with Ji-hoon during their lessons on architecture. The service entrance was exactly where Young Jae said. A heavy wooden door that opened onto a stone pathway winding through the garden. Dawn was just breaking, the sky pearl gray, the air cold enough to sting. A car idled at the end of the path. Black sedan, windows tinted, engine running. Young Jae emerged from the driver's side, his smile brilliant and false. He wore casual clothes, his hair disheveled, playing the role of desperate man on the run. You came. I wasn't sure you would. You said I was in danger. You are. We both are. He moved toward her, hands outstretched. Come on. We need to go before... The click of a safety being released stopped him mid-step. Taehyun materialized from the shadows beside the door, a gun pointed directly at his brother's head. His face was a mask of controlled fury, his voice dead calm. Step away from her, Taehyun. Young Jae's performance shifted. Now he was the reasonable one, the voice of sanity. This is insane. She's caught in the middle of our family politics. Let me take her somewhere safe. The Russo compound isn't safe. Taehyun's gun never wavered. That's where you're headed, isn't it? Trading her to clear your debts. Using her as a peace offering after you stole from them and poisoned our father to cover the theft. You're paranoid. You've always been... I have bank transfer records. I have text messages. I have video footage of you meeting with Dmitry Russo 3 times in the past month. Taehyun's voice was surgical, precise. I have everything, little brother. The only thing I don't have is patience. So move away from her, or I will put a bullet in your skull and tell the family council you resisted arrest. For a moment, Young Jae's mask slipped. Celine saw the calculation in his eyes, the desperate mathematics of a cornered animal. Then he smiled. Genuine this time, all teeth and venom. You won't shoot me. Not in front of her. Not when she's already terrified of what we are. What you are. Pull that trigger, and she'll see the monster you've been hiding. She'll run, and you'll lose the only soft thing you've ever tried to protect. You're wrong. Taehyun's finger tightened on the trigger. She already knows what I am. She kissed me anyway. Celine saw it happening before conscious thought caught up. Young Jae's hand diving into his jacket, metal glinting in the dawn light. She moved on instinct, throwing herself sideways as the gunshot shattered the morning quiet. Pain exploded in her upper arm. Not a direct hit, just a graze. But fire licked through her shoulder. She hit the ground hard, stone bruising her hip. 2 more shots, then silence. Celine's ears rang. She couldn't tell if she was screaming or if the world had gone mute. Strong hands lifted her, checked her, pressed something against her arm that sent fresh agony ricocheting through her nerves. Look at me. Taehyun's face swam into focus, his voice cutting through the static. Celine, look at me. You're okay. It's a graze, just a graze. Stay with me. Young Jae, on the ground, alive, unfortunately. Taehyun's jaw was tight enough to crack bone. My men have him. You're safe. Focus on breathing. Can you breathe? She could. Ragged, painful, but functional. Her arm felt like someone had dragged a brand across it, but the pain was grounding. Real. He was going to shoot you, she gasped. Yes. I should have let him. Would have solved your succession problem. Taehyun's laugh was sharp, humorless. You just took a bullet for me. That's either incredibly brave or monumentally stupid. Can it be both? With you? Absolutely. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. I'm getting you to the medical wing. Then I'm going to have a very long, very unpleasant conversation with my brother about attempting to murder his family members. Selene pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing in smoke and cedar and the copper tang of blood. Whose? She couldn't tell. The Russo family. Are they really coming? Eventually. Young Jay made promises he couldn't keep, stole property that wasn't his to take, but they won't breach the estate. We have understandings, protocols. His arms tightened around her. You're not collateral in their war. Not anymore. I made sure of that. How? You don't want to know. He was probably right. But as they crossed back into the house, Selene caught a glimpse of men in dark suits, dragging Young Jay's struggling form toward a different entrance. Not the cellar. Somewhere deeper. Older. A place where screams wouldn't carry. And Heijin stood watching, her expression carved from stone, a phone in her hand. Selene heard her speak as they passed. Yes, Dimitri. I have him, and the ring is in his pocket. Consider our debt settled. You may collect whenever convenient. The words chilled her blood. But Taehyun's arms were warm, and the medical wing's bright lights washed away shadows. And for now, that was enough. The doctor declared Celine's injury superficial. Painful, but not serious. The bullet had carved a neat line through the outer edge of her bicep, missing anything vital. She'd have a scar, he said, as if that was the worst consequence of the morning's violence. Taehyun didn't leave her side during the cleaning and bandaging. He stood with his arms crossed, watching the doctor work with an intensity that made the older man's hands shake. When it was finished, when Celine's arm was wrapped in clean white gauze, Taehyun dismissed him with a curt nod. They were alone in the medical wing's private room. You should rest, Taehyun said, but he made no move to leave. Where's Young Jae? His expression shuddered. Being questioned. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving you. He moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the morning light. Heijin made a deal with the Russo family, Young Jae for debt forgiveness, and a neutrality pact. They'll collect him tonight. What will they do to him? Nothing pleasant. Nothing permanent. He'll be returned eventually. Broken, humiliated, no longer a threat to anyone. Taehyun's voice was empty of emotion. It's more mercy than he deserves. You could have killed him. In the garden. You had the shot. I know. Why didn't you? Taehyun turned from the window, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. Because you were watching. Because I didn't want that to be the last thing you saw before you ran. Because I'm selfish enough to believe that some part of you might stay if I didn't become a monster in front of your eyes. Taehyun. The door slammed open. Ji-hoon stood in the hallway, his small chest heaving, his eyes wild with terror. They're coming. Taehyun was across the room in 2 strides. Who's coming? Uncle Young Jae's friends. The men with the snake tattoos. They have guns. They're at the gate. They're saying if we don't release Uncle Young Jae by sundown, they'll burn the house down with everyone inside. Celine's stomach plummeted. The Russo family? No. Taehyun's voice had gone deadly calm. His mercenaries, the ones he hired as insurance in case his coup failed. Somehow he got word to them before we locked down communications. He looked at Ji-hoon. Where's your grandmother? In the main hall, setting up for Jisa. The ancestral worship ceremony. Tonight was the anniversary of the family founder's death. A sacred ritual that required all family members present. Perfect timing for a massacre. Taehyun cursed in Korean, vicious and creative. Then he looked at Selene. Can you walk? Yes. Then move. Both of you. He was already on his phone, barking orders in rapid Korean. We're going to the panic room. Full lockdown protocol. No one in or out until... No. Selene surprised herself with the word. Taehyun's eyes cut to her. Dangerous. This isn't negotiable. You're right. It's not. Selene forced herself to stand, despite her arms screaming protest. Those mercenaries want Young Jae. Use me as bait. Tell them I'm the key to where he's being held. Draw them into the main hall during Jessa when the family is together. Then what? They execute you in front of everyone? Taehyun moved toward her, his face a thunderstorm. Absolutely not. I didn't survive a week of you nearly dying to watch you volunteer for it. You said the main hall has acoustics, right? From your great-grandfather's renovation. High-frequency capabilities in the walls for security. She'd learned this during lessons with Ji-hoon, teaching him about architecture and sound. If I can trigger the alarm system, it'll disorient anyone not wearing protection. Your men will have the advantage. You're describing a war zone. We're already in one. Celine held his gaze. The difference is, this time I'm choosing to fight instead of being fought over. Taehyun stared at her for 3 long seconds. Then he turned to Ji-hoon. Get to the panic room. Your parents are already inside. Now. Don't open the door for anyone except me or your grandmother. Understand? Ji-hoon looked between them, his expression ancient with understanding. You're going to use the Jesa trap. The what? Selene asked. Great-grandfather built the main hall as a kill box, Ji-hoon said quietly. In case rival families ever attack during ceremony. The sound system can... Go, Taehyun interrupted. I'll explain to Miss Peters. You need to be safe. Ji-hoon hesitated, then threw his arms around Celine's waist. Don't die, he whispered. Please don't die. Uncle Youngjae killed Miss Catherine when she tried to help me. I don't want him to kill you too. The casual confirmation of murder, this child's acceptance of violence as normal, broke something in Celine's chest. She hugged him back with her good arm. I won't, I promise. After Ji-hoon left, Taehyun explained the trap his great-grandfather had built. The main hall was designed to be beautiful and deadly. The ancestral tablets lined the walls in alcoves that doubled as speaker chambers. The ornate ceiling panels concealed a high-frequency sound system that could be triggered remotely, causing disorientation and pain to anyone in the room. Doors could be sealed electronically. Exit routes became death traps. During the Korean War, my great-grandfather used it 3 times to eliminate rival factions who tried to assassinate him during ceremony, Taehyun said. No one survived to tell what happened. The official story was always gas leak or structural failure, and you want to do the same to Youngjae's mercenaries. I want them to come into a room they think they control and discover they're already dead. Taehyun's smile was blade sharp. But only if you're willing to be the lure. If you say no, we lock down and wait for reinforcements. It's slower, riskier, gives them time to execute hostages or burn parts of the estate. But it's safer for you. Celine thought of Ji-hoon's terrified eyes. Of Catherine, the tutor before her, buried in a garden somewhere. Of the week she'd spent being pawn and victim and collateral. I'm in, she said. Tell me what to do. The plan was insane. Elegant, but insane. They would proceed with Jessa as scheduled. The family would gather in the main hall, surrounded by candles and ancestral tablets. Performing the ritual that required everyone present, Celine would stand beside Taehyun, not as guest or girlfriend, but as something the family would eventually recognize. His chosen partner, his equal. When the mercenaries breached, and they would, Youngjae's information had given them schematics. Celine would trigger the high-frequency alarm from the manual switch disguised as a ceremonial bell. The sound would incapacitate anyone without protection. Taehyun's guards, pre-equipped with specialized earpieces, would have approximately 40 seconds to neutralize the threat before the system had to be shut down to prevent permanent damage to the family. 40 seconds to end a war. If something goes wrong, Taehyun said quietly, draping a heavy ceremonial coat over her shoulders to hide the vest beneath. If they get past the sound barrier, you run. There's an exit behind the founder's portrait. It leads to the garage. Keys are always in the Mercedes. You drive until you hit the highway. Then you call the police and you never look back. I'm not leaving you. Selene, I'm not leaving you, she repeated, catching his hands. You drank poison for me. You shattered glass to defend my dignity. You promised me a choice. Stay or run. I'm choosing to stay. So teach me how to survive this. Not how to abandon you. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. You're going to destroy me. Good. You destroyed me first. The kiss was brief, fierce, tasting of inevitability. Then Taehyun pulled back, his expression hardening into the mask she recognized. The heir, the protector, the weapon disguised as man. Let's go honor the dead, he said, and make a few more in the process. The main hall was stunning in candlelight. Hundreds of white candles lined the walls, clustered around the ancestral tablets that bore the names of 4 generations of Choi family patriarchs. The air smelled of incense and chrysanthemums. The traditional flower of death and mourning. Family members filled the room in formal dress, their expressions solemn and nervous. Everyone knew something was coming. Heijin stood at the head of the hall, wearing traditional hanbok in deep blue, her silver hair braided with white ribbon. When she saw Celine enter beside Taehyun, something shifted in her ancient eyes. Not quite approval, not quite resignation, something in between. You honor us with your presence, Miss Peters, Heijin said in English, her voice carrying across the hall. Please, Stand beside my grandson. A woman of courage belongs at the right hand of power, the family murmured. Celine felt every eye on her as she moved to Taehyun's side, her bandaged arm visible beneath the formal black dress she'd been given. The bruises on her temple from the morning's violence stood out against her dark skin like accusations. She looked like exactly what she was, a survivor of the Choi family's civil war. Taehyun's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers with possessive certainty. To anyone watching, the message was clear. She was his, under his protection, part of his inner circle. The ceremony began. Korean words Celine didn't understand, poured like water over stones worn smooth by decades of repetition. She listened to Haejin's voice, watched family members bow before the tablets, felt the weight of tradition pressing down like atmosphere before lightning. Then, as the sun set beyond the tall windows, the main doors exploded inward. 6 men in tactical gear stormed the hall, weapons raised, faces covered. The snake tattoo Jihoon had mentioned was visible on their necks, a viper coiled around a dagger, the symbol of Youngjae's personal mercenary group. Nobody move. The leader's voice boomed, accented and rough. Where is Choi Youngjae? Tell us now, or we start with the children. One of the men grabbed a cousin's daughter, maybe 8 years old, pressing a gun to her small head. Celine's heart stopped. Haejin stood unmoved. My grandson is being held in the West Wing cellar. 3rd door, iron reinforced. Take him and leave. How stupid do you think we are? The leader laughed. You expect us to split up, search an unfamiliar building, while your guards pick us off? No, someone here is going to walk us there. Someone valuable enough that you won't risk killing. His eyes landed on Celine. The American. The one Youngjae was fucking. She'll do nicely. Taehyun's hand tightened on hers. Warning or restraint. She couldn't tell. She squeezed back, reassurance, or goodbye, and stepped forward. I'll take you, she said clearly. Let the girl go. I'll take you to Youngjae. The leader smiled. Smart woman, you might live through this. He gestured, and 2 of his men moved toward Celine. The moment their hands touched her arms, she stumbled deliberately, reaching out to steady herself against the wall. Her fingers found the ceremonial bell. She rang it once, loud and clear. The high-frequency sound system activated with a shriek that tore through the hall like a living thing. It was above human hearing but below tolerance, a pressure wave that hit the inner ear and brain simultaneously. The mercenaries dropped their weapons, clutching their heads, blood streaming from their noses. The family, pressing hands over ears as the guards had instructed moments before, weathered the sound with gritted teeth. Taehyun's guards moved like shadows given form. 40 seconds of absolute chaos. Shots fired but missing their marks. Hands fumbling for weapons that had clattered to marble floors. Bodies hitting ground, unconscious or dead. Celine couldn't tell through the sensory overload. Then silence. Celine killed the system, her hand shaking violently on the switch. 6 mercenaries lay on the marble floor. 5 unconscious, 1 dead, the leader, a single bullet hole in his forehead. Taehyun stood over the body, his gun still raised, his expression empty of remorse. Secure them, he ordered his men. Medical for the living, disposal for the dead, and someone find out how they got through our perimeter without triggering the usual alarms. Youngjae gave them the access codes weeks ago, with orders to attack if he missed his daily check-in for 48 hours. He planned this as his final act of spite. Then it's time we excommunicate him permanently. Taehyun lowered his gun, his gaze sweeping the hall, checking for injuries, counting his family, ensuring everyone survived. Then his eyes found Celine. She stood beside the wall, her hand still on the bell, her body shaking with adrenaline crash. She'd just participated in a massacre. She'd been the lure for a trap that left 6 men bleeding on ancestral ground. She should have felt horror, guilt, disgust. Instead, she felt only grim satisfaction and the bone-deep certainty that she'd made the right choice. Taehyun crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, careful of her injured shoulder. You did perfectly, he murmured against her hair. You saved them all. Every single person in this room is alive because of you. I rang a bell. You rang the bell knowing what it would do. You turned yourself into bait. You trusted me to protect you while you protected everyone else. He pulled back to look at her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. That's not nothing, Celine. That's everything. Around them, the family was recovering. Medics rushed in. The dead mercenary was removed with efficient discretion, and Haejin approached with that measured grace that never quite concealed the predator beneath. Miss Peters, she said formally, you have the gratitude of the Choi family. You have also earned the right to choose your own path from this moment forward. Leave, and you will have compensation and protection for the rest of your life. Stay. She paused, glancing at Taehyun with something that might have been approval. Stay, and you become family, with all the burden and blood that entails. Celine looked at the woman who tested her, judged her, nearly let her be executed, then at Taehyun, whose hand still held her like she was something precious and breakable despite knowing exactly how strong she was. I need to make a call first, Celine said. 3 months later, spring transformed the Choi estate into something almost innocent. Cherry blossoms drifted across manicured lawns like pink snow. The gardens had been replanted, the blood-soaked main hall renovated and rededicated. Sang-woo had recovered, diminished but alive, and had formally stepped down as patriarch. The family tree had been pruned. Young Jae's name had been struck from the official records. Not dead, but excommunicated. Exiled to a monastery in rural Korea, where former heirs went to contemplate their failures. He would live, but he would never lead. Taehyun ruled now, though he'd refused the traditional title. He called himself acting administrator and temporary guardian, as if power was something he wore uncomfortably. But Celine saw the truth in how the family deferred to him, how even Haejin sought his counsel before making decisions. The Choi Empire was his. He'd earned it in blood and strategy. And Celine, she stood in her apartment in Williamsburg, packing the last of her belongings into boxes. The studio where she'd built her business, taught her students, dreamed her small dreams felt like a museum now, a monument to a life she'd outgrown without meaning to. Her mother sat on the worn couch, watching with the kind of careful neutrality that mothers perfected when they knew their daughters were making irreversible choices. "You're sure about this?" Mama asked quietly. "No." Celine folded another shirt, placing it gently in the box. "I'm terrified. I'm moving into a compound with armed guards and a family that measures love and loyalty in blood. I'm giving up my business, my independence, everything I built. But I love him." The words came easier now. After 3 months of Taehyun driving into the city every week, sitting in her tiny apartment, learning to exist in her world before asking her to join his. "I love him, and I trust him, and I think maybe that's enough." "Love isn't always enough, baby. I know, but love plus choice is." Celine turned to face her mother. "He gave me 3 months to decide. He set up a trust fund I didn't ask for. He made sure I could leave at any time, for any reason, with enough money to restart anywhere in the world. He gave me every exit, Mama, and I'm choosing to stay." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Does he make you happy?" "He makes me feel alive." "Is that the same thing?" "Sometimes." Her mother stood, pulling Celine into a hug that smelled like home and comfort and all the safety she was leaving behind. "Just promise me that if you ever stop feeling alive, if you ever start feeling trapped, you'll call me, and I'll come get you. No questions asked. I promise." They finished packing in comfortable silence. Then Taehyun's car arrived. Not a limousine, but a simple black sedan with a driver who helped load boxes with efficient courtesy. Celine's mother hugged her one more time, whispered something in Spanish about keeping her wits and a knife, and let her go. The drive to the Hamptons felt different now. Not a journey into unknown territory, but a homecoming to a place that had claimed her through fire and survived. The estate looked softer in spring. Less fortress, more home. Guards still patrolled, but they nodded greeting as the car passed. The fountain in the circular drive had been replaced. The old one had been damaged during the siege. The new one featured a Korean phoenix rising from waves, wings spread in protection. Taehyun waited at the front entrance. He wore simple clothing, black pants, white shirt, no tie. His hair was longer now, brushing his collar, softening the severe lines of his face. But the scars remained, and the sharp intelligence in his eyes, and the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting. Celine got out of the car and felt her entire body relax in his presence. "You came," he said. "You doubted?" "Every day for 3 months." He moved down the steps, his hands framing her face with that careful gentleness he reserved only for her. "Every day I thought you'd realize what staying meant, and choose the safer path." "Safe is overrated." She rose on her toes, pressing her mouth to his. The kiss tasted like homecoming and future and the sharp edge of choices made with open eyes. When they pulled apart, Taehyun kept her close. "Jihoon has been counting days. He's redone your suite 3 times trying to get the book organization right. I told him you'd do it yourself. But he wanted it perfect for your arrival." Warmth flooded her chest. "He's speaking full sentences now? Paragraphs. Entire conversations. About dinosaurs mostly, but he started asking about philosophy and ethics, and whether revenge can be justice. Taehyun's smile was soft. You gave him back his voice. The least we can do is give you a home. What about your grandmother? Haejin had the staff prepare the Western suite. 4 rooms, private entrance. Your own space within the compound. He tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. She also mentioned something about marriage contracts and proper courting timelines. I told her we'd discuss it after you settled in. After you decided if you could actually tolerate living here full-time. And if I can't, then we find somewhere else. I meant what I said, Celine. You're not a prisoner. If the estate is too much, too suffocating, we'll get a place in the city. Something that's ours, not the family's. The offer stunned her. The Choi patriarch, offering to leave the ancestral home. For her, let's try here first, she said. If it doesn't work, we'll figure it out together. His relief was visible. Together. I like that word. They walked into the house hand in hand. Staff greeted her with respectful bows, not as guest, but as family. Minji appeared with tea and gentle welcome. The main hall had been redecorated. The ancestral tablets moved to a smaller, more intimate shrine room. The space felt lighter now, less weighted with judgment. Jihoon ambushed them in the library, launching himself at Celine with the enthusiasm of a puppy. You're here. You're really here. I organized your books by subject and then by author, and then I thought maybe you'd want them by color, but Uncle Taehyun said that was ridiculous, so I did subject, but I can change it if... It sounds perfect, Celine interrupted, laughing. Show me. They spent an hour in her new suite, which was less a suite and more a small, beautifully appointed apartment. Living space, bedroom, office, and a bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. Jihoon had indeed organized her books, and the sight of her modest library displayed on floor-to-ceiling shelves made her throat tight. This wasn't just a room. This was a declaration that she belonged. That night, the family gathered for dinner. Not the formal, suffocating ritual of before, but something smaller, warmer, just the core family. Haejin, Sang-woo in his wheelchair, a few aunts and uncles, Jihoon bouncing in his seat, and Celine, sitting beside Taehyun at a table where she was no longer the outsider. Haejin raised her glass. To new beginnings, she said, her gaze settling on Celine with something almost like warmth, and to the courage required to choose family, even when family is complicated. To complicated family, Taehyun echoed, his hand finding Celine's under the table. They drank. They ate. The conversation flowed in Korean and English, and when Celine couldn't follow, Taehyun translated quietly, his breath warm against her ear. Later, after the meal ended and the family dispersed, Taehyun walked Selene to the gardens. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, petals drifting through the air like gentle snow. The moon hung low and full, painting everything silver-edged. There's something I need to tell you, Taehyun said, his voice careful. Celine's stomach tightened. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just true. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Young-jae is dead. The words hit like physical force. What? You said he was exiled. You said, he was. The Russos kept him for a month, took their payment in flesh, then returned him to us. We sent him to that monastery to contemplate his failures. Taehyun's expression was unreadable. Then he tried to escape, tried to contact his remaining allies, tried to orchestrate one final revenge plot. The monks contacted the family council. Haejin made a decision. She had him killed. She had him tried, convicted, and executed by family law. It was clean. It was final. It was necessary. Taehyun's hands found hers. I wanted you to know before you heard it from someone else. Before you looked at this family and wondered what you'd really agreed to. Celine stared at him, processing. Young-jae was dead. The man who'd charmed her, framed her, nearly destroyed her was gone. She should have felt something. Grief, horror, vindication. Instead, she felt only a strange, cold relief. Thank you for telling me, she said quietly. You're not disturbed? I'm relieved. The admission felt dangerous. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you honest. Taehyun pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. And it makes you exactly where you belong. In this family, we don't apologize for protecting what's ours. We don't feel guilty about eliminating threats. We survive. Together. Together, Celine repeated. The word felt like a vow. 6 months later, the estate held another gala. Not the founder's jubilee. That tradition had been retired. This was something new. The the spring revival, celebrating renewal and transformation. Selena descended the main staircase wearing jade, the color of new growth, of life continuing. The dress had been a gift from Jin, tailored perfectly to her body, elegant without being suffocating. She wore her hair natural, her scars visible, her presence unapologetic. The family gathered below, along with business associates and allies who'd been carefully vetted. The room was full of power and money and barely concealed danger, but when Taehyun looked up and saw her, everything else faded. He waited at the bottom of the stairs, devastatingly beautiful in a black suit that made him look like violence wrapped in silk. His scars were visible, his tattoos peeking from his cuffs. His eyes locked on her with the kind of intensity that made her forget to breathe. When she reached the bottom step, he extended his hand. Ready to dance with the right brother? Celine took his hand, feeling the calluses, the strength, the certainty. I was never dancing with him. I was just waiting for you to cut in. They moved onto the floor as music swelled. Not a waltz this time, but something modern. Something that pulsed with life and possibility. Taehyun pulled her close, his hand settling at the small of her back, his body pressed against hers with possessive certainty. Last chance to run, he murmured against her ear. I'm not running. Celine's arms wrapped around his neck. I'm home. They danced beneath crystal chandeliers, surrounded by a family that had tested her, broken her, and ultimately claimed her as their own. And as Taehyun's lips found hers, claiming, promising, sealing, Celine understood something fundamental. Some love stories began with flowers and poetry. Hers had begun with poison and blood, and it was perfect.